Hello, brilliant entrepreneur. It's Tash Corbin here, and welcome to another episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. This is episode number 380, which means you can find all the relevant links and show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/380. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you 3 untapped audiences that you need to get in front of, and they may not be what you think. Before we dive into today's episode, I will also let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference, which is happening on the 6th and 7th of March 2024. This conference is an amazing opportunity for you to be in the room with brilliant, light-hearted entrepreneurs who want to see you succeed, and also to learn from our spectacular speakers. This online conference is not a sit and listen event. This is your opportunity to get your business in the spotlight, to build your network with amazing supportive people, and to grow your audience. So make sure you come and grab your ticket. I'll pop a link in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/380. Let's dive on in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. So, a lot of the reason why people follow me on social media, why people are listening to the podcast, why people are on my mailing list is because they love the way that I share how to grow your audience. They love consent-based marketing. They love that whole idea of a lot of organic marketing, although we don't want to stay in that space forever. But it is something that people love to talk about, and I have a lot of practical strategies on how to grow your audience. However, in most instances, people are focusing on audiences that take a lot of time to grow, a lot of money to get in front of, or a lot of time to get organic reach in front of. And there are 3 untapped audiences that are far easier to access, that are far more effective in growing your business, and that also generate more income so that you can fund the other audience growth activities that you want to embark upon. So if you want to create a podcast, then being able to hire someone to do the editing for you, being able to have the money to get those podcast episodes in front of the right people, that's really helpful to have those resources. If you want to get on in front of more people on Instagram, paying to do so is really easy when you have the money. So in today's episode, I want to talk to you about these 3 untapped audiences that you are able to access relatively cheaply or freely that will enable you to, in most cases, make more sales and get the resources you need in order to tap into some of those larger scale, more distant audiences as well. So I know that as entrepreneurs, we're always looking for more people to reach, more people to help, more people to share our services with. But these 3 untapped audiences, I think, are really powerful ones. The first is your own audience, your existing audience. And I don't care how small that audience is. If you are not getting in front of your existing audience consistently and with value and with your offers, then going and finding more strangers on the internet is kind of secondary, right? Like it's something that is more long-term because they're a colder audience, so it's going to take longer to make the sale. And it's also less likely to convert into sales. Your conversion rate with your existing hot audience is always going to be higher than your conversion rate with cold strangers on the internet. So getting in front of your own audience more consistently is critical. And it is something that I see a lot of people ignore and neglect, and this is an untapped audience that you should be focusing on. So stop hiding, stop holding back, stop ignoring your existing audience, and love on them for being your existing audience, no matter how small that audience is. So if you're not consistently sending emails to your mailing list because your mailing list isn't big enough, you're missing the point. I don't care if there's 3 people on your mailing list. Those people should be hearing from you regularly. If you're not consistently posting on your social media channels because you don't think that there's enough people there to warrant that actually being worth your time, then you're missing the point. And if everything you post on your Facebook page or on your Instagram or on your socials is targeted towards cold strangers on the internet, we need to rethink your strategy. A big portion of your content should be loving hard on your existing audience. Tell the in-joke. Share the realness behind the scenes. You don't have to be this picture perfect, polished person for strangers on the internet all the time. The more that you create connection and relationship and support and give value to your existing audience, the more engaged they'll be. And the more, as a byproduct, you will likely see that audience grow. But the giving them the value and loving on them hard as is also enough. That's enough of a reason to be doing it, because that audience have already indicated they want to hear from you. And you're neglecting them and ignoring them to go and find strangers on the internet who haven't decided yet if they want to hear from you. And that seems a little backwards when we talk about it that way, but it is a default behavior that we can fall into really easily. And I want to put my hand up and say it is a default behavior that I can fall into easily if I'm not conscious of it. So if I'm going for a big stretch goal for my next launch, I can be so fixated on getting my webinar in front of the newest audience and new people on the internet that I forget to make sure that every single person in my existing audience knows that that webinar is happening. And so that's like my default. It's like our default is more is better. More audience is better. New audience is better. Our default is probably a subconscious programming that says, if someone's on my mailing list and they haven't bought my program yet, then they're not interested. When I physically and absolutely know that that is not true. I know there are hundreds of people on my mailing list. There are hundreds of people who listen to this podcast who have one of my programs or buying a ticket to my conference on their wish list, on their, when I get the money together, I'm going to do that. And yet my default belief is, well, existing audience members already know about it, so I just need to go and find strangers on the internet. And so I am consistently reminding myself to love on my existing audience hardcore. And so I do that very consistently. But it can be a little default. Oh, I got to go find more strangers on the internet, especially when my daily to-do list or like my regular promos are all taken care of and they're done, especially when I've got a particularly big stretch goal, especially when maybe I'm feeling a little bit wobbly about something. So like my mindset might not be particularly great, or I'm feeling a bit tired. That's just the default, is cold audience, strangers on the internet. But that's not the most important audience that I need to be looking after. I need to be looking after my existing audience. So if you are not getting in front of your existing audience consistently, that is something we want to take care of and make sure we get that nailed. Number 2, another untapped audience that you need to get in front of is my audience. Now, I know this sounds really weird, but something that I love to do, and I do very consistently, and I do very openly, is I share you, the listener, you, part of this community, with my audience. So, and I share my audience with you. So I provide a range of different ways that you can get in front of my audience, right? And when I say my audience, I literally just mean the people in my orbit/sphere. And so some of those include, if you have a ticket to the Heart Centered Virtual Business Conference, hence why I gave a little shout out to it at the start of this podcast episode, then something that we do consistently is Pitch Fest. So everyone who has a ticket to virtual conference was recently asked to pitch to be a speaker at virtual conference, because I wanted to create that platform. I wanted to create that opportunity. The people who support the conference should be the ones who are on stage at the conference. And so that is something that I do very consistently. It's every single conference, whether it's in person or virtual, there's always at least one speaker who is a ticket holder, who has won a Pitch Fest. We recently just announced the winners of Pitch Fest for this year's virtual conference, and I ended up choosing 2 Pitch Fest winners. I may end up choosing 3 Pitch Fest winners. And that's because the strength of those pitches is getting better and better every single conference because people are used to pitching now. But also, the more I can platform you, the happier I am. I have this vision of filling the world's rich list with more marginalized people, with more people from communities like the heart-centered, soul-driven entrepreneurs community. And so in order to help make that happen, I need to platform those people. That's you. So let's do it, right? Let's get you in front of my audience. There are other ways that I provide opportunities for you to get in front of my audience. So you can ask a question in the podcast. So if you go to the show notes of today's episode, or at any time you go to tashcorbin.com/question, you can submit a question for me to ask on the podcast. And if we use that in an episode, I will link to your socials and to your website. I will give you a shout out on the podcast. I will tell people a little bit about your business. And there are people who've asked questions on the podcast who have made sales to some of my podcast listeners because of they simply asked me a question. So even just finding really low ask ways and low commitment ways for you to get in front of my audience is like something that I prioritize. You could invite me on your podcast if I am a guest on other people's podcasts, or I've done like Facebook Live interviews or YouTube videos. Then I share that interview with my audience. So if you have a way that I can come and speak on something of yours, I will share that with my audience. That is a beautiful way. And that's actually a lot of the way that I built my audience when I first started my business. Was I did a YouTube interview series interviewing entrepreneurs and business owners. And so when I interviewed them and I put the interview together and I published it, I let them know about that interview being published. I tagged them on socials when I shared about it, and then they would reshare it. And it wasn't as simple as it is these days, because the whole reshare and like sharing things that you're tagged in is so much simpler these days and so much more straightforward. But I just was very diligent in making sure that I made it easy for that person to share our interview. I also made sure that I was a good interviewer and that that person really shone in the interview. So it was something that they wanted to share. And a lot of the time they also then invited me onto their interview or onto something of theirs that they would share about my business as well, because I did such a good job of platforming them. So one of the big things that I say over and over and over again, and it's not my original content, is like, if you want to experience something, then give it to someone else. And we know this in manifesting, we know this in emotional stuff. If you want to feel happy, make someone else happy. If you want to feel loved, make someone else feel loved. Like, that's the fastest way to tune into that energy and tune into that emotion. Well, it's the same thing with the tangibles, right? If you want to be invited to speak on someone's podcast, start a podcast and invite guests onto it. If you want to be invited to, to be on a YouTube series, like, then platform that person. If you want to grow your audience, then help other people to grow theirs. If you want to be tagged and referred all the time, go and be good at giving referrals. And so, yeah, that's a really great way for you to get in front of my audience. And I'm really open about the fact that, like, I will share it with my audience, and we do as much as we can, because like, it's good for my business to show, look, I was on this person's podcast, or look, I spoke at this person's event. And I know that it's also good for your audience. So it's a win-win situation. Other ways that I give you an opportunity to get in front of my audience are if you join my programs, if you buy any of my short-term events as well. So things like conference or the 5-day client attraction challenge, or recently I did a program called Kickstart. Or if you're in one of my bigger programs, then that is an audience of mine that you then are able to get in front of. So for example, inside the Kickstart program, there were several times where I encourage people to get to know each other. I encourage people to follow each other on socials. I encourage people to form small group masterminds and get to know each other in more depth. I encourage people to share some content that we might find interesting so that we can all fill our news feeds with other people who are from this community, because that's a really positive way to create a beautiful newsfeed that is supporting who you are, rather than telling you need to change who you are inherently. There was a whole big theme around that. So it's not just like you're in the program together. I actively create ways for you to be in front of all the other people who are in that program. And similarly, I do the same with the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs Facebook group, which is completely free to join. And that is your opportunity to share about yourself, share about your business, and share your paid and free offers every single week. And the number of people who are in that community who do not post consistently or do not comment and engage on other people's content consistently, and then are like, social media is terrible. It's not even social. Social media doesn't work. Social media is expensive. Social media this, social media that. And I'm like, you could just literally spend 10 minutes a day in the Heart Center community, and you would find more amazing people to fill your feed with. You would find potential clients. You would grow your audience, and you would make sales. The more you show up, the more consistent you are, the more present you are, the more you're known within the community, the more there are people who can refer you clients, who can talk about you online, who can invite you onto their podcast, who can buy from you. And it is completely free. And it is a completely fair and even opportunity as well. So in that community, I don't have a paid membership level at the moment. I don't know if they're I never say never, but I don't think it's going to be part of it. But there's no, you don't have to pay to be allowed to advertise. The only cost, in inverted commas, to advertise is that you're an engaged member of the community. That's it. And even that we have not previously really diligently monitored. We are definitely monitoring it a lot more now, because we do see there is a theme of, a certain portion, not a big portion, but a certain portion of the members of the community only ever post an offer on market day and only ever post promos. They don't post on any of the other days. They don't engage on anyone else's content. They're not actually an active member of the community. They just see it as an advertising space. That's not what the space is about. It's not just an advertising space. It is a connection space. But all you need to do is tell us what you're doing this week on #CEO mode, or share a little something about yourself, or share a little tip with us on Wednesday, and now you can advertise on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's a pretty low ask to be allowed to promote something and grow your audience in that community. And it is an audience that I actively encourage you to get in front of. I'm not here to hold people back from making amazing growth and reach within the Heart Center community. There are people who attribute the first $30,000 of sales they ever made in their business to 95% coming from sales in the Heart Center community. And that is amazing. And I love it. And I want people to outshine me in that space and outperform me in that space, because the Heart-Centered Soul-Driven Entrepreneurs Group is not the Tash Corbin Show. My page is the Tash Corbin Show. It's called Tash Corbin. That's the Tash Corbin Show. And I think people can sometimes be a bit what's the cost, or what's the catch about the openness of the opportunity in the Heart Center community? But it literally is not a big ask. And I ask that you read the group rules and familiarize yourself with the guidelines, post within the spirit of the group, and engage other than just advertising to us. That's not hard to do. And it's an audience that you could be getting so much traction with and so much momentum with. It's an audience I think you should be in front of personally, especially if you work with entrepreneurs. But even if you work with people who are in a job, there are at least 20% of the members of the community have a job, in a job. I would say at least 15% of the community haven't started their business yet. They're just entrepreneur curious, and that's okay. And so that's a beautiful opportunity for you to, on Perspective Day, do some market research. On Hot Take or Hot Tip Day, give us your hot tip, give us your hot take, tell us your opinions on things, and promote your offers. Market days on Tuesdays, freebie days on Thursdays, and it's a really, really engaged group. We love to buy from each other. We love to follow each other. And that community is now 10 years old and going strong. And so sometimes I think the other reason people don't see that as a valid community is that it is a closed community, and that it seems like everyone's just buying from everyone, or it feels like it's like a closed economy. But a closed economy is still an economy. And like I have not had my electricity payment rejected because no, you made that money out of the Heart Centre community and you spent more than that in the Heart Centre community last month. Like, that's not how it works. And so I also think that some people, like, because it's not a scalable audience, a scalable opportunity, I think some people then underestimate the value of that opportunity or underestimate the value of that audience. But if I said to you, I'm going to give you a ready-made audience of 35,000 people who are interested in hearing from you and who are potentially your ideal clients, and they are going to help you with your market research, they're going to buy from you, they're going to sign up to your mailing list, they're going to like absorb your content and ask questions and like give you all of the insight that you need to build a very solid foundation of your niche and your value proposition and know how to like test and market your offers for free. I'm going to give you that audience of 35,000 people. I don't think people would be so quick to dismiss it, but that's exactly what it is. So the second audience I think you need to get in front of, and particularly more consistently, there are a few of you who do plenty and you know who you are, but for those of you listening to this who do not consistently engage in the Heart Centre community, or like take up the opportunities that I give you in order to get in front of my audience, I think that that's an audience you need to be in front of. And then the third one is paid spaces. So I just said like a bunch of this is absolutely free, but there are some paid spaces where the fact that everyone has paid to be in that space means that it's slightly more connected. It's slightly more filtered. It's slightly more engaged. It's slightly more trusted. That extra little piece of connection creates an exponential improvement on the results that you'll get from being in front of that audience. And this is another reason why I am highlighting and spotlighting the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference, because that is an audience that you can get in front of for a very low price. And going to events, whether they be virtual or in person, is one of the most powerful ways to build a high connection network. And the more connected you are to someone, the more likely they are to buy from you, but the more likely they are to also refer other people to you or provide shared opportunities for you to get in front of each other's audiences. And that is exactly what we facilitate at the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference. But whether it's virtual business conference or something else, going to conferences and events, being online or in person, is a powerful way to get in front of a new audience that is a little more qualified, that is a little more connected, that is a little more trusting. And so because of that little bit extra layer of we've all paid to be in this space, there is a far higher return from that audience than if you were to get in front of the same number of people just with a reel on Instagram, for example. So being in a virtual conference room with 100 other people who have all paid to be there is very different to reaching 100 people with a reel on Instagram. And yet, how many people are overly focused on their reach on Instagram or their reach on Facebook with cold audience when there's a beautiful, qualified, high connection audience available to you for a relatively low price? And especially if I was to weigh up the price of a ticket to a virtual event or the price of a ticket to an in-person event versus the money that it would cost me to reach and engage with that same number of people on using paid advertising, there are a lot of events that would win that like hands down, because of that extra qualification, because of that extra connection and trust. So conferences and events, joining courses and masterminds, just the huge growth that comes from being in the room and being in front of that audience, whether it be being in front of them by having a chat over the tea break, or whether it be being in front of them by being in the chat box on a virtual event, or whether it be being in front of them because the event has structured networking like we do at the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference, or being in front of them because you can have an opportunity to have the microphone and ask a question. And in asking your question, you are like being more visible to the people who are in the room and the people who are on the stage, by the way. The first 3 speaking events that I got as a business owner came from going to events. 2 were in person, 1 was online. Going to events and asking really smart questions. And the question that I asked and the way that I asked it got the attention of not only the speaker, but also the conference organizer. And they invited me to be a speaker the following time around. And that has happened so many times at the Heart Centered Business Conference as well, where I've met someone at conference who was a ticket holder, and then they've just blown me away by how engaged they were, or the way that they supported other people at the conference, or the very smart question that they asked, which was just spectacular. And so that person has then been invited to be a speaker at conference next time. I mean, I am so keen to put you on stage that I literally put up a slide in the in-person conference. Every time I have done this, I put up a slide on stage with the year of the next conference, and it says, welcome to the stage. Like if you were at the 2024 event, it will say, welcome to the stage, 2025 Heart-Centered Business Conference speaker. And I encourage people over the breaks to go and get their photo in front of that slide on the stage so that they can put it on their vision board and manifest the opportunity to be a speaker next time around. I want people who support the event to be on stage at the event. And I know a lot of other organizers of both virtual and in-person events are exactly the same. And so whether it be, sometimes it's a matter of paying like $50 to be part of a 1-week event. And I think like for $50, like even if you didn't listen to a single speaker, if you were just super active in the Facebook community for that event, you would grow your audience with very qualified, very high connection people. You probably get a podcast interview or 2 if you actually showed up consistently. That is an amazing audience for you to get in front of. Now, before we close, I just want to say that there are ways to get in front of these audiences that is very high connection and very high value. And there are ways to get in front of these audiences that actually does the opposite job. So I also know that I've been to events before where I have had conversations with people where it is very clear to me that they've set themselves a target of giving out 25 business cards, and that's all I am to them is a number. So I don't think it's a valuable experience to, for example, go to an event and be in the room and have the opportunity to be in front of all these different people and then just treat them like receptacles for your business card and not actually get to know the humans that are there. The amount of times that someone has had like a 5-second conversation with me. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I am an online business mentor. Oh, amazing. Well, I'm an accountant for online business owners. So we definitely should be friends. Here's my card. And then they're off talking to the next person. That's very different to actually getting to know the humans who are there. And with that in mind, I do also want to say that these opportunities to be in front of these different audiences are actually very introvert friendly. Because of the extra connection that you have, because of the existing relationship with your existing audience, or the connection that you have because you're both part of my audience, that actually creates a little sense of safety. And the strategies that I would recommend to get in front of those audiences often don't require you to be an extroverted person. They don't require you to like constantly be in the presence and company of other people for extended periods of time, thus draining your introvert batteries. But instead, they curate and create opportunities that are very introvert friendly for you to be able to show up in a way that feels safe for you, that feels energizing for you, and still create amazing connection and grow that brilliant audience. So being in the room can be one of the most powerful ways that you can get in front of those audiences, of those paid spaces. And you don't have to be on stage to be in front of the audience. Some of the best connections I've made have come from being at the table at the back of the room, a little bit wide and a little bit over, sitting and listening and feeling like we're the naughty corner of the room, and having like deep and profound conversations with those people. And that has actually become like a super high referral network of amazing business owners. Or being at a virtual conference and making jokes in the chat box about something that's happening, or an accidental slip of the tongue or something else that's gone on. It doesn't necessarily need to be that you are talking about your business and you are dropping into every sentence that you happen to have this expertise, or here's what I would do if I was on stage because I know better than the speaker on stage. We want to be mindful of the way that we show up in these spaces, but absolutely, they are so valuable to your audience growth, and they are also very valuable in terms of the return that they'll make for your business. So with all of that being said, I've got 2 things for you in the show notes of today's episode. Number 1, it's an invitation to the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference. It includes a coupon code for you to get $50 off your ticket. So if you use the coupon POD50, i.e. you've been listening to the podcast, POD50, you'll get $50 off your ticket. So I've made it even more reasonable in terms of the price point for you to be able to be in the room. I've made it a little bit more affordable. So if you use POD50, I'll put the link and the coupon code in the show notes of today's episode. But I also have a free resource for you, and that is my Grow Your Audience training. And this is a very straightforward and practical training on how to grow your audience, and it layers these high connection audiences with some of those bigger reach audiences as well. So if you are listening to this and you're like, I'm already in front of my own audience consistently, I'm already in front of your audience lots, Tash, and I'm already jumping into those paid spaces and showing up as a leader, I'm ready for the next level of audience growth, that is covered in the Grow Your Audience training. If you're listening to this and you're like, I'm never in front of my own audience, I've not taken up the opportunity to be in front of yours, Tash, and I rarely go to any kind of events or jump into paid spaces and show up and be seen in those spaces, then this training is also going to be very helpful for you, because that's where we start. We start with audiences that you can reach for free. We start with audiences that you can reach that are high connection, therefore high conversion. And then we layer on top of that going a little broader and a little colder. And then we layer on top of that, going a little broader and a little colder. So it's called Grow Your Audience. I'll put the link to that with the show notes of today's episode. So you can find all of those over at tashcorbin.com/380. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. And I genuinely hope to see you at the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference, not simply because I want you to buy a ticket and for this to be a profitable event, which it already is, but because I really do want to give you the opportunity to get in front of more people. I want to give you that platform. I want to help you grow your network, because I know that our network is so aligned with the level of growth that we see in our business, and especially for women and marginalized people and non-binary folks. Like, for us, we haven't necessarily had access to those ready-made networks like the straight white dudes of the world have for thousands and thousands of years. So being able to kind of balance the scale a little by providing extra opportunities for us to be able to build those networks with each other, for us to be able to support each other and, create that like inner circle for ourselves, actually, I know is like also tipping the balance in our favor for the long-term business growth, for the short-term sales that are coming in the door, for giving you the opportunity to access resources that will allow you to then expand into larger and larger audiences. So please do make the most of those opportunities. Please stop ignoring your audience, and hopefully I will see you at the Heart-Centered Virtual Business Conference. If not this year, maybe next year. Thanks so much, everyone, and I will see you soon. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.